More environmental madness. I don't know which one of these two will cause you to slap your head the hardest. They are both rather tragic, but in very different ways. The first one is the ongoing saga of the Middlewick Ranges, which is a piece of MOD land which they're trying to sell off for building houses. They want to put 1,000 properties on what should be a nature reserve. It's a rare acidic grassland and there's only a few left in England. Apparently it has around 200 birds that are on the European endangered list and even one that was thought to be extinct. Now, I don't claim to know all the ins and outs of this particular saga because it started way before we started Council Watch. But the long and the short of it is, because this area of ground has been put on the local plan, it means it's suitable for developing. If it wasn't on the local plan, then they wouldn't be able to develop it so easily, I think. But the people representing the MOD have come up with a cunning plan. Yes, they went to the Baldrick Academy. Their cunning plan is to dump a whole load of sulphuric acid onto a nearby grassland, and thus turning it acidic, and then lifting up a proportion of the wildlife on the Wick and popping it there on the new site. A local group called Save Middlewick Ranges had a bit to say on that.
I want to talk about the continued inclusion of Middlewick Ranges as designated under the local plan for housing, for 1,000 houses. The consideration of the ecology and the sustainability of the Wick as a natural resource and of a biodiverse area had already been decided. Since then, a whole load of additional information has come to light from experts about the ecology, about the biodiversity, view, independent of those who want to bulldoze the place down and build houses.
It's crazy. We're going to move 44% of a natural environment away from an area that should just be left alone. Why are we allowing a developer to come in to take away all that nature? 44%. It's huge. It's wrong, basically. I do believe now the time has come to remove it from the local plan on the basis of it's too good a site to help climate change to allow it to be built on in the future.
I'm a senior ecologist at Essex Wildlife Trust. I have been for their consultancy and have been there for 18 years. Middlewick Ranges is one of the most important, biggest and significant local wildlife sites that I'm aware of in the county. It's incredibly concerning to hear of the plans. Actually, the more I've heard, the more concerned I've been. In particular, the veracity and the legitimacy of the reports I've seen really are very flawed concepts, and there is a scientific consensus. You ask anyone else other than the people involved, irreplaceable habitats can't just be recreated. As far as I'm aware, there have been no surveys, no wildlife surveys of that compensation site, the sacrificial lamb. What we're talking about here is a comprehensive destruction of not one but two ecosystems, the grassland and scrub mosaic at Middlewick Ranges, and then the sacrificial site, which is now actually much more interesting than it was. The adding of sulphur using experimental, unproven techniques on the compensation site threatens that ecosystem.
I went to one of the consultations on Middlewick, and there was an ecologist there from the MOD who told me that you could move badger sets and basically dig them up and move the badgers to another part of the area.
Yeah.
Oh yes, absolutely. But you can only successfully move a badger set if you first move the Oompa Loompas and the Easter Bunny. Otherwise it just won't work.
Area.
Yeah.
And everyone's told me that that's impossible. So I think we could do what Councillor Lissimore was suggesting and have the expert advice.
So we're talking about moving badgers, moving reptiles, moving entire ecosystems that take many hundreds of years to establish. That mindset in a biodiversity crisis, climate crisis and a nature emergency is incredibly dangerous. And I think future generations, our children will judge us very harshly if we disband and destroy these very valuable wild spaces. And that's permanent. It's over.
The sulphuric acid idea is just beyond ridiculous. It's obviously been hatched by someone that knows nothing about soil but is probably highly qualified. Basically, as Martin Pugh said, you have an entire ecosystem. You can't just lift bits out and pop it elsewhere. Ecosystems are created by everything in it, hence the name, ecosystem. So you've got the mycelium network, which connects everything. You've got all the soil microbes, all the plants. Plants can't feed themselves, they rely on the soil bacteria. So coming along and throwing a load of acid on the soil is not how nature does it. Nature is incredibly intelligent, apart from humans, obviously. A bit of a design flaw with those. This is as traumatising for anyone that cares about nature as it would be for someone that cares about history if the idea was to knock down Colchester Castle and build it somewhere else with modern cement and bricks. I probably shouldn't say things like that because it'll only give them ideas. If you'd like to learn more, the Save Middlewick Ranges has its own Twitter page, and they have some videos which have been done by another local councillor. Sadly, he's not in Colchester Council. I wish he was. He's the kind of councillor that says what he means and means what he says. So go and have a look at those videos. They're very good. Right, let's move on to the next tragedy. This one is almost funny. Sort of, but not. Basically, the council have been given a lot of grant money to help people insulate their homes. They've sent out loads of letters to the local population, and the local population have ignored them, thinking it's a scam. So they can't actually give it away. When you consider that they plan to crack down on poorly insulated homes so much that people will be fined or end up in prison, you'd think people would snap their hands off at this opportunity to get subsidised or even free insulation, which is leaving council officers scratching their heads not knowing what to do. Thankfully, the councillors came up with some very good suggestions, which I'll show you in a moment. But other than the complete lack of faith that local people seem to have in getting anything free from the council, the other thing that really jumps out is the sheer number of companies involved with all of this. And I do have a few questions. Where do all these companies come from? There's trusts, consortiums, charities, other companies, more hubs, all sorts of things all going on. They don't seem to be local, they seem to be national. Is anybody locally installing any of this insulation?
We used Warmworks, the managing agent. They were procured by the Greater South East Net Zero Hub. Although we weren't part of that bid, we still had to use Warmworks. But we only achieved 36, and that was mainly due to that every installer had to be qualified in past 2035. And there's a cost to convert to that.
There certainly is a cost to convert, to train people to be able to fit the insulation to meet these government standards. Each level seems to cost around 600 or 700, and the final level 2,500 plus VAT. It's not entirely clear whether that's per company or per employee to get the past 2035. I suspect it's per employee. And presumably the companies doing these training had to also pay to do the training to train others. But still, saving the planet is a remarkably complex thing, so it's not surprising it takes quite so many qualifications with so many people and so many companies.
So the total capital spend was £319,325.88, and as you can see there, £73,441.52. Now that was higher than we were expecting because we had to move, applied and had to have a survey just to check that they were within that D2G.
But that's an awful lot of surveying, £73,000 worth of properties that didn't make the grade. So although the installers didn't get to benefit from the grant money, at least the surveyors did.
So the total spend was just shy of 400,000, and so that left us with £277,584.12 to return to DESNZ, Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. So quite a range of measures. And as I say, the average of 10,000 per property. But for example, one property had about 40,000 spent a day because of the cavity wall, external wall insulation. So
here's another one.
Again, it's available to owner-occupiers, private rental sector tenants and landlords. Again, it must have that APC rating between D and G. Now, we've been awarded $2,060,000, an average spend of 18,000. Some properties, again, will have more spent on them, some will have less, but it's got to average out at 18,000. So,
but why an average of 18,000?
Take-up hasn't been great, to be honest. I think part of the problem is that people are getting letters and they're thinking it's too good to be true.
Now, if you found the HUGS scheme confusing with all the criteria to meet, don't worry, we've got other schemes. There's plenty more where that came from. Here's another one.
Again, it's a government-backed scheme. This one has £1 billion available nationally each year of the grant scheme until 2026. So, in theory, a huge number of properties could be done. And this one's open to every fuel type. The idea of all of these schemes is what needs to be put into the house to insulate the house and make it warm and draft-proof. The reason we went with these is because BHBH can offer other grant schemes. So if you don't qualify for Eco4, they may have other grant schemes, which we'll come on to as well, such as boiler replacement scheme, have their own funding that would not be available anywhere else. So actually it's really good for our residents that if they don't qualify for one scheme, BHBH will always be looking for what the best fit is and can they be helped anywhere else.
So who are all these companies? How come some of the funding goes to the council and how come sometimes they have to go through certain companies to get more funding? It's all very confusing. My head is spinning faster than the machines in a laundrette. Who would have imagined just getting loft and wall insulation could possibly be this complex?
And this is the main point, is that I do need your help. If you know anywhere to promote these, certainly rural north would be looking at.
So here are the sensible suggestions that the councillors came up with.
Yes, I share your concern about getting the message out there. And I've had over the years a number of residents contact me and say, what is this? Is this real? And I always say, almost every meeting, use us as councillors. Keep us in the loop.
We also, all of us, have social media pages that are local residents are on our local groups. If maybe that's another avenue we can go down.
On a more serious note, I'm a bit concerned about this one particular property that had £40,000 spent on it. Is that cost efficient? Would we do that on our own property? Regardless of whether this is government money or council money, how did we, council, make that assessment to decide that it was cost effective?
We didn't, as the simple answer. That was on the LAD 3 scheme, and so the applicant would have applied to Warmworks, and then an assessor would have gone out and worked out what could have been put into the property. In that case, they'd have decided it was exterior wall insulation, which in itself is really expensive.
But the numbers are quite stark. I'm quite shocked how low. Thousands of residents here are heating the air above their homes with money they don't have in a time of an energy crisis and a cost of living crisis. We've got a comms problem. We've got a skills problem. We've got a trust problem. We're failing to hit targets and we're returning money to DESNES. I had two suggestions. One was the volume landlords. 25% of people are renting in Colchester. A number of them are renting from volume landlords. What are the change of communication to them? We've got a private landlords team. Are we working with them? Are we explaining the benefits to landlords? We have various tenants organisations as well. Really, really complicated this, isn't it? All these schemes, all these acronyms. How on earth do you cut through this? The headline is, do you want free or subsidised insulation? Can LCCC comms teams not do some whiz-bang things with that?
Cynical people might think they've declared a climate emergency purely to extract more money out of the population. It's a shame they didn't declare a pothole emergency as well. If they can persuade the people of Colchester to take them up on their offer, at least everyone will be cosy, even if they're not able to leave their homes, because the roads are so bad. So until next time, goodbye.
Thank you.